Wall Street Journal front page today. Donald Trump's assertion that as president he should have more say over the Federal Reserve, how the Federal Reserve sets interest rates, would, if carried out, reverse a long-standing custom by which the central bank enjoys political autonomy, does it, to fight inflation and often unpopular rate increases. Oh, heavens. There he goes again, violating all norms, right? Or not right.
Not caring about the middle class.
The Federal Reserve is the issue. And the mystics on the Federal Reserve from time immemorial, including Jay Powell and the current board, these are like the hybrids in Battlestar Galactica. Oh, we seek their direction and try to translate their inscrutable rhymes. Their political autonomy. Is that what they have? Really? Jay Powell is completely insulated from politics. He doesn't take that into consideration. And previous Fed chairman before him. Yeah. No, I'm not buying it. And, maybe the libertarians have something on the ball when they say, and the Fed. The Rand Pauls and the Ron Pauls before him of the world. Maybe there's something to that. It's like these agencies that we think are somehow steeped in the founder's vision for this country. No. Federal Reserve was created about the same time as the federal income tax, and I think we could probably do just fine without either. Let's see what Jim Iuorio thinks. Jim Iuorio is the host of the Future's Edge podcast. He's also a special contributor to Wire Points, and he is a proprietor of Brandt's Restaurant in Palatine, unsubsidized restaurant, not unlike the grocery stores coming to Chicago. For now, but maybe. Jim Iuorio, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Are you very concerned as the Wall Street press corps, if you will, is very concerned that Trump may try to be more influential than previous presidents when it comes to the decisions made by the central bankers?
Well, the funny thing is that all presidents think the same, and they'd love to control everything. You don't become president unless you're a narcissistic control freak. Trump just says it out loud. Do I think it's a good thing to do, to threaten the Fed, et cetera? No, it's not. Is it a big deal? It's not a big deal at all. It's a much bigger deal than to be some double dealing in a dark room where you tell the Fed, you're going to only keep your job if I keep my job. And that probably goes on and has forever, too. You were thinking about libertarians wanting to end the Fed, and I always thought that was crazy and radical up until about the last 4 years.
Right.
And now I don't think it's radical at all. I think ending the Fed would be a good idea. What's better is that I actually think there's a place for a Fed with about 1/10 the actual activism that they engage in, trying to stop every recession from coming. We're supposed to have recessions, and we're not supposed to panic every time the stock market goes down 10%. So the Fed is a menace, but they don't have to. And I don't think it's Jay Powell's fault. I think he's put in a bad situation. Yeah, you know what? I actually take that back. I do think a good part of it is Jay Powell's fault. But they have done just irreparable damage here. In June of 2021, CPI had printed over 5%. We were already in a housing bubble that was inflating, and Jay Powell said it's transitory, and he hit the gas for the next 6 months. I actually think deep down he was worried that it was transitory, and he knows full well that we need a high level of inflation to bail out these indebted government agencies all over the country. Did you get more of an answer than you wanted there?
Well, no, but I mean, I mean, that's not so easy as saying end the Fed. You have to have a discussion about it. I'm not the slogans guy, but it speaks to, it prompts a conversation, which is what we want to do. And yeah, I mean, it's funny, right? A lot of radical ideas that seem radical back when we had some level of confidence in these institutions to at least be acting in a well-intended manner consistent with their stated objectives.
Yeah,
that's gone. And so, I mean, so even in your, sort of middle position of we have a Fed, but they act with more restraint. I mean, which is something we could say about a lot of government agencies. You know, I mean, I used to be an acolyte of this too, like Friedman's 3% rule. You know, you can have a Fed, you can have the central bankers, but just let's operate from some baseline, Friedman's 3% rule, so there's some predictability and consistency, and there is less manipulation. But of course, there's no ability to restrain people to those to those sorts of positions, and so you get a decade plus of quantitative easing, which we've gotten, and you get the funny money that was printed during the pandemic, and you get sort of overtures to fiscal restraint in Congress by the monetary policy guys, but essentially they underwrite the fiscal recklessness regardless.
Amen to that, no doubt about it. And you and I, we could form a committee right now with some good economic minds and come up with, let's say, 10 indicators that change weekly and automate kind of a Fed process about moving rates. By the way, the best thing for markets would be that rates were just set where borrower meets lender.
Yeah.
The Fed getting involved in it and obfuscating the price will always cause problems. But the question is, if they do it in a very, very minor way, it'll cause minor problems. If you do it in a major way, it'll cause major problems. So you said the right thing. They're people, and people have emotions. And in the trading world, some people found great successes with automating out the emotion. Like if this happens in the market, we're long. If this and nobody has to think about it and worry and have sweat running down their head. The Fed does this all the time. And to say, are they political? Of course they're political. They are appointed by the government. They are approved and reappointed by the government. If one president like Donald Trump says, yeah, I'm going to fire this guy, it is perfectly reasonable to assume this guy wants to keep his job and therefore may want the Democrats to win the election. I don't think that that's a leap at all. And are they going to be political? Yeah, they always are. Why wouldn't they be now?
All right, so the week that was, markets have calmed down after the Friday, Monday sell-off and the prospect of the R word. I can't say it. People get scared.
I can't. Just go to me. I'll say it.
People get scared. But I mean,
Trump yesterday said we're not going to have a recession. We're going to have a depression.
He did say that. He said there's a danger of that if we continue on this path with these sorts of policymakers. That is what he said. And so what say you, Jim Iuorio?
So Monday morning was hysterical when all these talking heads were coming on TV saying the Fed needs an emergency rate cut now. And I'm actually in the recession camp. Those numbers last Friday were the labor numbers, and the labor numbers have been misstating the health of the labor sector for a year and a half. The jobs that have been created are second and third side hustle jobs, full-time career jobs are cratering. Also, there's things that disagree within the numbers, and their government healthcare and education jobs have been disproportionately higher over the last 2 years. So the number, we are definitely going into recession, but then you have to juxtapose that against the fact that the federal government is spending money like drunken sailors. No insult to drunken sailors, probably even more than that. They're amassing $1 trillion of new debt every 85 days currently, and this is all you get for your money is an economy that's sputtering around. But the funniest thing on Monday morning was only thing that changed is the stock market was cratering, and guys like Jeremy Siegel, who I've known for years, going TV saying the Fed needs to cut rates 75 basis points now. No, they don't. The only thing that's changed is you're losing a little bit of money. Stock markets go down. Every 3 years on average, the broad stock market corrects 20%. Every year and a half, it corrects 10%. This is not a big deal. Stock markets go lower. Our age people think, okay, we saw 2008, we saw 2001 when all hell broke loose. And you have to ask yourself the question, is the situation set up for that? And I say the answer to that is no, because there was incredible leverage in certain assets in those two instances, in '01 with tech stocks and in '08 with real estate, that needed to be unwound over time. Now things unwind in a couple seconds. People press a few buttons, you have these huge down moves, and then it's all good. I still think this move lower has some legs, but I don't think it's anything to build a bunker and stock dry food or whatever that is.
Right. Well, what happened in Japan, though? I mean, they had one of the worst trading days since 1987.
Right. People think the carry trade is complicated, and it's not even remotely complicated at all. So for the last 3 years, interest rates in Japan are 0. Interest rates in the United States are 5%. So all these big international entities, they go to Japanese banks, they borrow yen because it's 0 interest rates, they sell that yen to buy dollars, and then they buy U.S. assets. Well, anytime you build up these positions over years, when something turns, it could cause people to head for the exit and exit the trade. Now, that's what we saw on Monday. Now, the Nikkei had broke 30% in the matter of about 3 weeks because they were starting to anticipate this new higher rate then everything has to unwind. And stock markets, even if the fact that the yen going higher is something that we probably ultimately want for the global economic picture, but we don't want it going higher so fast that it causes chaotic feelings in other markets, and stock markets tend to hate disruption. So that's what we saw on Monday morning to a certain extent. There's a lot of reasons for that too. Remember, in our market, we had built up such huge positions in like 7 stocks, something that we haven't seen in decades, that sort of concentration in 7 stocks. So that position needs to unwind too. So it's just all about a little catalyst. And if you want to say that Bank of Japan raising rates by 0.15, 15 basis points last week was the thing that started everything going, yes, but that story is small. The real story is that people weren't respecting risk and had too big of positions in all these assets.
Yeah, but isn't part of the story too? I mean, not with respect to it necessarily unwinding what happened on Friday into Monday, the Japan piece of it, but Japan is a canary in the coal mine for us. Japan is a harbinger in terms of decades of essentially corporatist policy that stagnated their economy, combined with a zero population growth, which is endangering their future, and central bank currency and interest rate manipulations.
There's no question about it. They have about a 230% debt to GDP ratio. You were taught in business school that if a country gets above 100% debt to GDP, that you start to put them on the watch list for bad things happening. To put that in perspective, over the last 90 years, 52 countries have hit a debt level of 120% debt to GDP. 51 of those countries have engaged in some sort of default where they pay people back with way cheaper dollars or they don't pay them back at all. Japan is the only one that's been able to extend this for 15 years, but it is absolutely crazy. You will get no real growth if you have a government that spends like that and controls everything. And you mentioned the word corporatism. Like, just think about that for a second. We don't talk about that enough. The federal government gives $9 billion to Ford to build EVs just last year. $9 billion. It's not an insignificant amount of money. But the whole thing then the government is bought in and has made a bet on EVs, so it crowds out any other sort of technology that may come in and be a better technology. So we never want the government being involved in these corporations at all, and yet that's all people seem to be screaming for. Like, chips are not being made here, let's make chips here. So then all of a sudden that's another $10 billion out of our pockets that goes to build something instead of letting the free market solve it. So there's a lot. We are on, to Donald Trump's point, we are on an awful path. If we keep spending money like we are, we spend it in good times, there will come a time where people might not want our bonds and people might not want our currency. That time is probably far off, and that's what gives them the courage to behave recklessly. But if we ever get to the wall and hit it, when you have a currency problem or you have a debt problem and nobody wants it, these are the worst kind of economic problems that could possibly be. Think Venezuela. Think Caracas having no more cats and rats in the city because they became a food source for people. And that's not an exaggeration. That's really what happened when their currency collapsed. And I'm not saying it's going to happen here. I'm saying we're coming weirdly and recklessly close to that area for no apparent reason.
It's interesting you mentioned feral wildlife, because I think that is going to be one of the featured items at Brandon Johnson's Gimme That grocery stores in Chicago. He's planning to open 3. They've done the studies. They've got the pro formas worked out. They know the subsidies they need. They understand the profit margin on which these city-owned and backed grocery stores will operate. And this, of course, is in the name of food equity in areas in Chicago that they believe, the central planners do, are underserved by grocery stores. Are you excited about this big idea getting closer to fruition?
No, the idea is completely asinine. They talk about food deserts, yet they don't police these areas. They bragged about not policing these areas. And then I remember when the riots were happening in 2020 and Target decided to move stores out of Chicago. And Lori Lightfoot was like, why are you doing that? And implicit in their response was like, we paid you money these years to protect us. And then when the time came to protect us, you didn't. So Brandon Johnson, who's this pro-crime mayor, and by the way, that this is not. People say when I say those kind of things, and I do say it for dramatic effect, like pro-crime. What do you mean? Yeah, no, pro-crime. I'll list you 5 different policies that can only be interpreted as pro-crime. So the fact that grocery stores aren't going to these areas in a normal competitive environment is completely understandable. Him bringing in government-owned grocery stores as more kind of this march toward communism will fail in spectacular fashion. And again, you and I know this. The question is, we could have a bet: does it fail in 2 weeks or does it fail in 2 months? But nobody's going to argue that it's not going to fail and be a absolute. Every word I thought of.
Nobody's going to argue. What are you talking about? We have the mayor. We'll have most of the city council. We'll have the Chicago Teachers Union. We'll have a majority of the population celebrating this as.
I'll be at the ribbon cutting.
Yeah,
Governor Pritzker will be there. Everybody.
Maybe if you got on board, you could get a commemorative shovel at the ribbon cutting too.
I am in then commemorative shovel.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I meant no logical and reasonable people.
Oh, well, that's different.
The history of government.
Yeah, that's different. Yeah, that's a that is a very discrete cohort in this community. Jim Iuorio is the host of the Future's Edge podcast. He's also a special contributor to Wire Points and the owner, proprietor of Brant's in Palatine, which is